Hello again. Welcome to Denton's Tales. We now continue with this three-part look at the goddess Hel, and a few further thoughts regarding the misunderstood and misrepresented Hel, ruler of the realm of the dead in Old Norse religion that bore her name. Firstly, though I have referred to her as goddess of the dead, not goddess of death, as she is usually called, there is a question as to whether or not she is actually a goddess. That is a point I want to look at here. And I touched on the subject of food and drink already, but to expand a bit on that, as I feel it's a very important point regarding the Norse attitudes to the afterlife, and the considerable differences between that and the Christian ideas on the same subject. Firstly, is Hel a goddess? Indeed, is she even a demigoddess? She is almost always referred to as a goddess, though incorrectly as a rule as goddess of death. But is that strictly correct? I refer to her as a goddess, but in the Eddas she is never mentioned as being a goddess, or really anything else for that matter. When Odin sends her to Niflheim to rule over the dead of the nine worlds, he makes no mention of what her status there is as such. She is simply ruler of the realm of the dead, in which she could certainly be seen as queen of the dead. So one has to look further at her father, Loki. It is also questionable if he was in fact actually a god at all. He was the son of two Jotnar, or giants, Thorvaldi and Laufey, making him a giant himself, of course, and Hel and her siblings also. He was not the offspring of gods, yet he came to be regarded as a member, at least, of the Aesir gods, and took his place in Valhall, though he seems not to have had any specific duties there. Now his mother, Laufey, is referred to at one point by Snorri as a goddess. Oh yes, he states that she was indeed a goddess, which is slightly strange, since, as I said, the Jotnar are not gods, though they could become gods. I mean, Skadi was also a giant, but became a god of the Vanir on her marriage to Njorda. Though how Loki's mother could become one, I don't know. But that is perhaps where Loki's acceptance among the gods came from. One theory is that one of Odin's brothers had sex with a Jotun woman who then had a baby, and that baby was Loki's mother, which would perhaps entitle him to the status of demigod at least, or possibly even a full god. There is a clue, though, in Loki's surname. Oh yes, a very substantial clue that supports Snorri's claim as to his mother being a goddess, which by Norse custom his name should have been Lorbautison, his father's name, with son added. But Loki's surname is Laufeyson, the son of Laufey. A highly unusual, if not unique, method of naming, and one which suggests that his mother was indeed a goddess, thus outranking his father and giving him her name and making Loki a god, thus his acceptance in Osgard. There seems no other reason for him to be named in that manner. Clearly, his mother had some very, very high status. Otherwise, such a name would not have been used. That does seem, well, it seems almost like proof of what Snorri had to say. And that naming system, incidentally, of tacking son or daughter onto your father's name is still used in Iceland and the Faroe Islands today. It's quite nice, I think. So would Hel take a divine status from Loki? In which case would the same be true for Loki's other children? Or should she be seen as a full goddess simply by her appointment to such a prominent role as ruler of the realm of the dead, whether or not it was actually specified by Odin? On the face of it, from the Eddas, it could be taken that she had no official status among the gods, though her father's surname very strongly suggests otherwise. It really proves it, in fact, in my opinion. Yet at the same time, her authority in her own realm, it was total. Even Odin himself could do nothing in it without her permission. Desperate as they would have been to get their son Balder back from the dead, Odin and Frigg could not order Hel to release him. Oh no. Instead, they sent an emissary, Hermod, to ask her if she would release Balder. The ruler of the gods asks Hel to do something. What does that say about her status? Could a mere queen, or even a demigoddess, refuse the orders of the All-Father himself, the ruler of the gods, reduced to more or less begging her? Now, as it happened, Hel was moved by Frigg's entreaties, telling of how Balder was universally beloved by all. She had compassion. She could be moved. I mean, this clearly shows that she was capable of feeling sorry for someone. And she promised to release Balder from the underworld if Frigg's claim about his popularity were proven correct. And everything, both alive and dead, would weep for him. Well, everyone and everything did exactly that. Everyone loved Balder. All but a Jotun woman named Thok, who absolutely refused. She shed a tear for Balder and said he could stay where he was. It is presumed that she was in fact Loki in disguise, but regardless of her true identity, her refusal meant that Hel's conditions for the release of Balder had not been met, and she had to keep her word. She had promised to release him if everything wept for him. Everything hadn't. Hel had no choice, and Balder would have to remain in the realm of the dead until Ragnarok. That does certainly show a nice, compassionate side of Hel's character, which is something I think should be pointed out. And all in all, the foregoing seems to suggest that, even if Hel were not officially a goddess, she certainly wielded the authority of one, at least in her own domain, far more than would be expected from just a demigoddess or a mere queen. And Loki's surname certainly suggests very strongly that his mother was indeed a goddess, thus conferring that status on him and presumably his children. What other reason could there be for him taking her name, not his father's? She must have had a standing far above others for that to be even possible. Now, to the topic of food and drink in Hel, which I touched on previously, something that I haven't actually seen mentioned elsewhere, and I think it is very significant. Hel feeds people in her realm. She puts on a great banquet for Balder and Nanna when they arrive, spreading rushes across the benches to make them comfortable, brewing special mead for the occasion. There are gold rings everywhere, and Balder is given a place of honor at Hel's own table, which says a lot about Snorri's comments on Hel elsewhere that make it out to be a miserable and gloomy and not at all a nice place. But the food and drink aspect is overlooked. It's significant in my opinion, and it's, to me, obvious indication as to the true nature of the Old Norse Hel, as against its Christian counterpart. The dead have no need of nourishment. They don't require food to stay alive, well, since they aren't. You can hardly starve to death if you're already dead, so food and drink in Hel are for the purpose of enjoyment. They are for pleasure, not necessity. The pleasure of food, the pleasure of drink. And, of course, the same can be said for the Einherjar, the warriors feasting with the gods in Valhall. They're just as dead as the residents of Hel. They've no need of food. It's obviously there purely for enjoyment, not need. And the Old Norse were very fond of a good feast. Oh, yes, with lots of mead or ale. An afterlife without roast boar and a horn of mead. Oh, well, that would indeed have been the punishment. Oh, dear me, dear me. So, the idea that food, drink is available in Hel for the purpose of pleasure, for enjoyment, does that not completely contradict any idea of it being a miserable place of punishment? I mean, you weren't going to get a slice of roast meat and a horn of meat down in the Christian version of Hel. Oh, dear me, no. Does that not give the lie to the claim that Hel was a miserable, foreboding realm of utter despair, the dead existing in a state of gloomy depression until Ragnarok would open the gates and let them out, as Snorri tries to suggest? Hardly. It fits the idea of Hel as really a continuation of life. Well, it's dull, perhaps, but nothing to complain about. People eating and drinking, doing other things they'd done in life. Some warriors engaged in mock battles, flowers growing in fields, and a ruler who could be kind and welcoming to important new arrivals, and be compassionate, willing to release someone if the suggested terms could be met. That is why I see Hel's banquet as a very important, though ignored, clue as to the true nature of both she herself and her realm. Were she the gloomy creature that Snorri paints, he wouldn't have cared who arrived in her realm. It would have been a less than interested sort of hotel check-in. Olaf Iverson, yes. Room 23,000, left-hand side, that way. Here's your key. Next. Oh, Balder and Nanna. Room 23,001, left-hand side, that way. Here's your key. Next. Of course, the curious thing is that we get the miserable, unpleasant image of hell and her welcoming feast from the same source, Snorri, almost as if he were painting her the way the church would like her to be seen, but he also couldn't help himself putting in her true persona. Sadly, the miserable image is the one that stuck and was repeated down through the ages, with that one brief mention of her skin color, not mentioned by anyone else, somehow becoming her seen as a half-rotting corpse, like something out of a Hammer horror movie, where one would almost expect her servants to be played by Boris Karloff, Vincent Price, and Bela Lugosi. To end, here's an interesting little tidbit of information. It seems that the term hell, the place where the dead go who are not very nice in life in the Christian version, spelled with two L's, was borrowed from Norse paganism. The Norse version, spelled with one L, decidedly better, not having sulphur and brimstone and grinning demons poking people with pitchforks. Well, come to think of it, that could be quite entertaining. Anyway, now, to clarify that, the name hell, the pronunciation the same, of course, with one or two L's, is Norse in origin, not the concept of somewhere the dead went. I mean, there are plenty of references to that in the Bible, but the word hell itself, that word and the concept of a large realm for the dead, we get from the Old Norse. The Old Testament uses the word Sheol, which meant a grave, somewhere you put dead people, and it could be translated as the underworld or the place of the dead, but in, say, the King James Bible, it is translated as hell, and for that matter in every other version of the Bible. The same in the New Testament, where Greek words like Hades or Gehenna are used in the original version, but they too become hell in later translations. That is completely incorrect. That is not the word used in the Bible. It isn't found in either the Old or the New Testament anywhere, and Jesus is never quoted as using that word. It is a later creation. Hell does not appear in any original versions of the scriptures. The first use of the word hell in English actually comes from as late as 725 AD, and it was by the Anglo-Saxons in Old English, where it was either hell, spelt with one L, as in Old Norse, or hella, spelt H-E-L-L-E. So that brings us to the end of this little trilogy on the subject of hell, goddess of the dead. I hope you enjoyed it, and all that remains now is for me to say farewell. Goodbye until next time. Goodbye for now.